This is memory painting, part of the Arctic Circling Back, my year-long study of my work in the Arctic to 2022. And I'm going to just show my back in camera so you can see what's going on here. Get this out of the way. And we're going to set this palette. It's just not my regular palette, but it's just what I'm using today. I have done, so I promised that I would show you some of the different steps involved in my work. So I did some sketches. This memory painting is painting from my memory of the Arctic, what I remembered from my experiences. And before I get too started, I want to say that this activity is made possible by the voters of Minnesota through a grant from the Minnesota State Arts Board, thanks to a legislative appropriation from the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. In short, the Minnesota State Arts Board are the folks that are making this possible. And if you have stopped at my gallery, you've likely seen my postcard here. And or maybe you've received a mailing or you see my postings. And so you're aware that this is one of many in a series so far done. And we're working with mediums outside of my typical artistic practice in order to stretch me and to just activate some different parts of my brain and to expand my creativity. Painting, drawing seems fairly straightforward to me. It's the pushing the envelope to go to other areas, creating different types of feeling, capturing the feeling that I had experienced there, some of which were feelings of the smallness, the remoteness, the pristine environment, the quiet. It was a long process to get to the Svalbard, a flight from the Minneapolis St. Paul airport to first through Iceland, Reykjavik, then to Norway, and then finally to um, um, changing planes once again to Longyearbyen, which is the largest, the northernmost settlement of 1,000 people or more. Um, we were basically at about 80 degrees north latitude, and I will tell you more about my trip there as I paint. It's a little bit easier for me to talk while I'm painting than when I'm doing just this setup and drawing. So hopefully you all can see what's going on here. I'm just gonna, there we go, a little bit more. Um, so what I'm doing here is I am painting just things that I can remember from what stuck with me. Um, and this was my memory of a hike. First, I did just this very quick sketch um, to try to lay the made blocks out. I normally would not draw this much in the on the canvas, but because um, I'm working from memory and I'm not actually looking at something, it's tough to um, see what all is going on in my head without getting something down on the paper. So I just want to get some things going on. This hike, we were carrying just a bunch of stuff. We were going to this glacier. So this glacier into this small, it was probably a small fjord. Fjords are just glacier cut cavities. This glacier originally would have extended much further out, um, and it's receding at this point, but it is calving. So we were not able to touch it. We got close to it. I don't remember exactly how, how close, but I do remember the guides are very, very protective of us, our safety, and making sure that we were not hurt, checking out the places that we would um, stop and scouting out for polar bears ahead of time. Right now, I'm just sketching out some of the rocks that we were. There's just this um, cliff or mountain hill, very cliff, really. Um, Obviously, had been damaged somewhat by the action of the glacier, and so it was had left. I guess the freeze thawing also maybe had dropped a lot of uh, large blocks that we were walking on as we were trying to get close to this. We had walked for quite some time, probably more than half an hour, certainly. But that's enough for what I want to get done. I want to get some painting on here as quickly as possible. Uh, I do want to mention, I'll just show, this is the box. It's very relatively small that I had taken to Svalbard, shorter, smaller than my regular box. It's just these plastic bins, and I was painting on using some of these different tools, um, rubber brushes, palette knives, and you can look at that just a little bit while I'm setting up my palette here, which is I've been working on for some time. Did a commission this week, so I needed to get something done. So I did not get everything um, cleaned up on the palette as I normally do. So I'm working with, in terms of my paints, I use Winsor Newton paints. This is an underpainting white, which is a quick drawing white, which helps um, just to be able to get things on the canvas and to work without needing to wait so long for paints to dry. Oil paints can take a week or more to get touch dry, and I am working wet and wet, which means I'm not waiting for the background, for the sky to dry. I'm just painting right into the wet and wet, which means that I need to work around. I'm working with negative space and positive space. And when I was painting there in Svalbard, I was painting, I would take, very similar to the panel that I'm going to be showing you, the a 9 by 12 panel is mostly what I'm painting on because I can easily carry that. I have another box with slots that I can put wet paintings in, and it keeps the paintings from rubbing against each other. And when I would go out hiking for just a day, I would not bring all of that gear because it was just way too much. But I would bring the two panels, and then I had a frame that I could use to hold the panels apart so that they were not rubbing against each other. And in that way, then I could uh, keep painting. And I did not always paint in oils. A lot of times I was working at the beginning of the trip, it was a lot of oil painting. But then as time went on, more and more, I was shifting to watercolors primarily because we just were not stopping for very long. And though this box worked great, the box that I'm showing you, the tripod was not even third string. It was a very weak tripod, and it was damaged somewhat with my painting. So I did not get to do as much work anyhow. So I've got the palette mostly put together, which you will see in just a second. We're going to put this away. And you're seeing the palette here. So often a palette is, I'll slide down and see if we can get all of this in the frame. Tools out of the way. And for mediums, I'm not using very much. I'm using a Neo Miglip, as well as just small amount of turpentine, not turpentine, but turpenoid. And yeah, that's what we're working with. We've got the palette here, and I want to make sure that folks are seeing what I'm seeing there. One more color. This is King's Blue. It's just a blue violet. And, I will squeeze out a little, mix my own blue violet here, which I know I have tubed someplace, but not positive where that is. I use blue violet. I guess I use blue violet quite a bit. It's one of the darkest colors other than black, which I have squeezed out onto the palette as well. Blue violet is 5 parts ultramarine and 1 part alizarin crimson. Doesn't really take very much. And it's unmixed. It's just a very dark color, but mixed, then it is a a very bright color. I typically work from back to front, so I will be working with the sky first. There we go. I think you can see and everything. So with that amount of prep, still about 10 minutes in, and we have a lot to do. So palette knife in hand, we're going to be working very quickly here to get work done. And again, I'm working from memory, but I was seeing the scene in front of me for a good half an hour while we were walking. So it's in my head. I remember some of the things that I remember were the unstable ground that we were walking on. Uh, and I was just traveling with a small backpack, but others were carrying a very large pack with a view camera, which is a tall box of a large box, heavy as heck. I offered to help Harley once and regretted it just a little bit because it was so heavy. Um, and I'm going to be painting primarily just a blue sky here. Um, it was not always blue, but it was less than half, but um, it's just going to be easier to do that. And there was definitely warmth in the sky. The notion is that, and you're going to see me working with my fingers here because especially when I'm working fast, that is just something that works out that I found works really well. And when I was in the Arctic, I was doing a lot of painting with my fingers. And the reason being, which is, well, that's one of the reasons I wear these glove hands, but it was just that much easier to get paint down. I did not travel with Turpenoid there. You can paint just with oil colors. They are fairly smooth, flowing. One of the reasons I like to work with oils is the how the feel is the part that I like most. So I'm just using this tiny little bottle, I guess, hotel liquor. Because it's just small, has a very small cap and opening, which means that I do not spill things very much. So I've already got the hand a little greased up from spilling a little terpenoid, filling up the, I'm just going to wipe that, some of that on the panel. It kind of pre-greases that up. And I'm going to do, so without traveling with terpenoid, that meant that I was not doing much with brushes. I don't paint a lot with brushes, even when I do have terpenoid. I do a lot of palette knife, and you will see the rubber tipped brushes that I use. Um, why this instead of the bristle brushes? Well, speed is one thing. I do not spend as much time as a painter should rinsing out and washing my bristle brushes. And I found that um, the paint would get up into the ferrule of the brush so much. And my colors were not very clean. They got muddy, which in some cases, muddiness is not a problem, but in other cases, it is. And so, again, we're not painting from references here, so um, we're just doing a lightly graded sky. Might add a little bit of um, the King's Blue into this mix just to take down the saturation just a touch. Um, but see how quickly I can get the sky covered here, which would be next to impossible. Maybe not next to impossible, but my speed typically with brushes is not that quick. Uh, Again, we're going to get a lot done here in an hour. So you will see this panel be completely covered by the time I finish. Will it be exactly correct? Well, correct to what? It's working from my memory. Uh, so it's what I remember. How close is a person's memory um, to their experience? Open to interpretation. Like I said, some of the things that I'm going to be on this painting. The feeling there was a feeling of closed inness in this. There we go. So, all right, sky done. So, don't know what that was in terms of minutes, but and I realized I should really get some of the sky down here. This is the mountain reflections, and know that typically it's muted. Often it's if it's light, it's darker. If it's dark, it's lighter in water. I do not remember there being waves in the water here. It was so protected into this fjord that I just do not remember there being anything. Certainly, if there had been some calving of the glacier, then there would have been some waves. But if there was calving, we would not have been in this area because that if it was a very large calving, we could have been hurt. So to show you back, move this over a little bit. You can see what's going on here. So we're getting the sky into the water here with some of the, mostly I guess the King's blue probably, and maybe gets a little bit deeper as it goes out. But this is going to be fairly thinly painted compared to some of my work. I don't, there will be some work that is more thickly painted into this panel, which you will see. So so we have that. Then we're going to be working from the back to the front, again, just based on my memory of what was going on. These Spitsbergen is the name of the large island that we were on, the largest island of the Svalbard archipelago. And Spitsbergen means sharp rock, tall rock. And so lift that up just a little bit so you can see both palette and there we go. That's a bit better in canvas. Sharp rock, tall rock, and I would several thousand feet certainly in terms of the tallest peaks. We were not climbing these. The most that some folks did was to hike up um, a hill to be able to see um, and this I realized this document camera, it's a good step darker than what I'm seeing into my eye. So it's still a bit darker than it should be, possibly in terms of the average, but it's not as dark as you're seeing there. The rocks were a mixture of, I would say probably mostly granite, but grayish green. Uh, there were some fractures in the rock here and there, having carved the glacier having carved this really um it felt like it was somewhat unstable. Really don't know how unstable this whole cliff was, but it felt somewhat unstable. These rocks that we were on, I'd say these were at least about half the size of a person down to a foot big, and as we were walking, they were unsettled somewhat. This is a vertical face, so that's going to be darker than the horizontal face. And I'm thinking a bit as I'm doing this, I need to squeeze out more paint, even though it's a fairly small canvas. There's a lot to cover, especially since it's white. Now, often I would likely have painted this an underpainting, but for one reason or another, I did not. And maybe it's because I thought that I was going to be doing a bit of um, under glazing, and I likely am going to be doing some of that here now, just because in the interest of time, um, to get more covered, because I'm looking at what time we're doing here. So glazing is normally done um, with various mediums, and I just want to get maybe more of an average, some average tones on this panel. I do want to leave maybe a little bit of, now one needs to remember, well, which colors are transparent, which colors are not. So you're seeing a little bit of, didn't put too much just too much color there, but um, ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson are transparent colors, which means that they will um, let the color behind show through. Again, I'm painting from memory here, but what I'm remembering is that a lot of times the upper parts of these mountains would be uh, not just darker, but well, they would be less snow covered um, than the than as it went down. And so I'm just using a bit of this brush to capture that. But then as it went on backwards, I do remember there being more of a grayness. Um, and probably back here it was even more grayish blue. It is so difficult to not repeat patterns over and over again as one is doing a painting. The eye just seems to want to do same over and over again, equal spacing. All of this is a bit bluer gray than what you're seeing, but I am going to just add a little bit of green. The green is pre-mixed, but it is it's middle green, so it's about half on the value scale. Trying to vary the colors just ever so slightly here. I do remember there being some snow on, and some of the snow will be added afterwards, but we'll at least have an indication of the snowy areas by the by what's showing through this. And then as we get down closer to the glacier, um, there was more of just a different type of shape. Um, I feel like it was more of a rounded shape. I'm sure there was probably it was far away, but there was probably some talus meaning that rock had fallen the off the face of the mountain in various chunks, very similar to this, although this was like a smaller version of it. Um, so that's at least that. And then this vertical face as the mountain stepped back down to the water was definitely a darker, and we're going to do a little bit of the indication of this is not going to be the whole thing in the water is going to be less um, I would say in general darker just because it was um, so closed in to the area. Desaturation also, I would say in general, is what happens to the reflection in the water. Um, so more more of the same overall, um, keeping some of the colors the same in terms of this bluish color. Just seems to make it more of a harmonious composition overall. So, but this face going into the water then was a bit darker. I know I've just blended those two together, but there will be a method to my madness here shortly. I'm trying to keep the reflection. One of the things that working with watercolor over the last year, 2 years, 3 years taught me was the notion of aiming for a softness in the water, not so hard. And I feel like I'm still learning. That's just so much. But I do remember there being a lot of vertical types of rocks here and there. Um, and we use some of this extra before I leave the brushing. There'll be a combination. It's not that I do not use brushes. I certainly do use brushes. It all just depends on what, um, because I'm in the studio here, it's certainly easier to clean up afterwards, and I'm not bringing the toxic substances into the environment. So as as was my concern with regards to the uh, bringing things like that into this such pristine Svalbard. One of the things I'm remembering now is just how much one can get variety in terms of the brushes, the softness in the background, and perhaps working more with the harder areas in with the palette knife, concentrating a little bit on varying the colors in terms of the angles. I remember there being, again, I'm painting from memory here, so I don't have a recall of everything that I had seen, but I remember jaggedness was the one of the things that I remember being my overall appearance was just jaggedness. Now this is obviously much closer than that, so we're seeing more detail, and because of what you were going to be seeing here in terms of the rocks, you will see the how that is coming along in terms of that jaggedness over and over again. So there's a lot of time spent just thinking, looking at the piece that you're seeing in front of you, that I'm seeing here. Normally, maybe I would be both looking at the scene, but then also looking at the what I'm seeing there. I'm with these rocks coming forward. I'm going to be working from back to forward. I'm concentrating on their trapezoidal cubes, variety of different shapes, primarily grayish colors. Um, we're not quite to that point yet, but we're getting there. I'm wanting to get some of this overall value of a middle gray color that's going to be descending down to them, mixed with a little bit of darker as it went down um, into some of these craggy areas, but then back into more of a gray as we got to see the glacier in the distance. Now the glacier was um, not saying a rounded top, an uneven top, vertical facing. Um, the colors predominantly a mixture of greens and blues and whites and some dirtiness to it because it was moving rock around. And so whatever it um, had picked up along the way, there was some of that going on as well. So again, jaggedness, trying to capture that. Vertical types of fracturing as well. So I want to get some maybe middle colors in terms of some of these vertical aspects that I'm seeing. Um, There's some transparent brown and orange. There's not going to be much orange here. I might be outlining just ever so slightly some of the rocks and cavities that I'm seeing. And I do paint with rubber tipped brushes. These are rubber tipped, and it's just a sort of convenient shape there. Now, it's not holding paint. It actually releases paint very easily. So that is going to be useful. And certainly there's different sizes, but you can vary it. You can turn it here and there. And I will be working with that. Um, so to try to show some of the different faces and the rocks, I'm now starting to think about the different shelves that I was seeing as we were walking back into the area. Um, it was very uneven. There were some other, I feel like there were multiple days that we would go into seeing something like this, but this day was definitely more of a time when it was definitely very uneven. There were here, and I believe that maybe as we got close, there might have been a little bit more flatness area here. I was mostly taking pictures this day. I was not painting much because we were just on the move. There was not a lot of time to think about the the notion of what we were seeing. So um, there's just less. I'm sure that I have photographs, but again, I'm not concentrating here today in this demonstration. And we're almost 40 minutes in, so I need to start hightailing it into these rocks, which I knew that the rocks in the foreground here were going to take more time than some of the other areas. So that plus the glacier. So those are some areas that will definitely take some time. And there will be some of these white spots that you're seeing, they will be covered up, believe me. Uh, in some cases, there'll be lighter colors on top. In other cases, they will be darker because we're seeing more cavities. Um, so all to come. But we're giving the paint just a little bit of time to set up here and there. Um, and that's all good. So then on to the rocks here. So I'm concentrating on um, the variety of different shapes, and I'm just going to want to get a variety. I should work on middle values, then darks, then lights. I know the middle green was middle, obviously, so that's useful. I've got some Payne's gray, which is a bit darker um, here. So this is Payne's gray, just off the view of the camera in this area here. Um, and then maybe I will use my combination of the King's blue and some of the, I would not say it's highlight. I have way more than enough. Um, what I'm just trying to do here is to get three colors, light, dark, medium, but all still in the middle value. Um, Maybe something that's a bit warmer, has to be lighter than the green, but it should not be just too warm. Although there was some sun that day, but again, not overly bright. Um, so some mixture of some different colors. That's maybe more of a vertical. It's a little bit more of a warm. And some of my pre-wetting of the canvas here with regards to the um, to getting the turpentine on there, I feel like is lending itself just a little bit in terms of the coloration. And I might switch to some of this and various palette knives. I've got a lot of brushes in my hand now. You can see how much um, is there, which is not unusual for me. Um, I'm wanting to concentrate a little bit on varying the colors, cooler as it's back, warmer as it comes forward, but just a titch, just a little bit. Um, but I'm going to concentrate on cubes, triangles. Some of it maybe cuts into this area here. Pushing, pulling is something often that you might hear an artist talk about. Um, so maybe it's turning the brush a little bit here and there. I have a light on one side, a dark on another. So some of this had already set up, which was very useful. Unfortunately, there's not as much here, but maybe we're going to use this brush to get some big shapes. Um, Big forms in terms of the shelf here that I was walking on. And again, I need to avoid making the same shape over and over and over again because that's boring. So definitely darks on the verticals going down into some of these areas. At this point, maybe it's a suggestion of some of the shapes going down to the water. Again, there's going to have to be some lights on top of some darks underneath, which are going to happen here. But if I take a little bit of time to get some general color and just a little bit more brightness here, brightness, warmth is what I was trying to suggest. Variety of different color, different interesting shapes for me. And you got some of the King's Blue coming along there, which is slightly warmer than the green that we had down, even though in one case one thinks that green would be warmer, but this King's Blue, what's on my palette currently, has enough enough other colors on it that it seems to have warmed itself up somewhat. So I want to get enough time here to get some of the glacier put down so you can see what um, my memory is that the water line of the glacier, it was more of a darker color with some colors going up on the glacier. And definitely greens, brightness. I'm going to probably use a combination of a phthalo blue, which is definitely a cooler color. This color needs to be brightened a little bit. Um, Maybe some of that along mixed with some of the yellow, not terribly, just too much. I feel like some of that greenish blue, and it's going to be a variety of some different um, colors that we're going to be seeing. Some blue, some white, and I might be turning ever so slightly. Again, I'm working from memory here, so I don't know um, exactly what I'm remembering. It was darker than this, certainly, so these are going to be more the darks. There's going to be some brights coming up from the bottom. Um, as it came forward, lighter on top, my memory, although there was some variety here and there. Um, I'm just going to arbitrarily make this a bit darker here, so that there's a little bit of a variety, and remembering that I need to get similar color in the water, but it's going to be somehow shifted one way or the other. Um, Not exactly sure. Sometimes darker, sometimes lighter. It's all good. Definitely, the top of this really can't go into that as well. So there's going to be some rocks that I'm going to show there. There was a combination of rocks um, and ice, going down into that water, some ice chunks here and there. Um, so, and I'm struggling just a little bit to remember what the top of the glacier was, if it was a titch warmer, uh, or what. I'm going to think maybe that there was some warmness to the top of it. Um, Going back, I feel like it was definitely a combination of grayish colors and just not not light, not white, I should say. Um, but maybe some of these verticals that there were some overall mixture of the light and dark. That sometimes it's happy accident. I feel like that is what I remember it being, even though I couldn't have told you that that is what I needed to put down there, that grayish light. One of the beauties of painting from the memory is that I am not biased by having something already that I'm trying to match. What I'm trying to match is what's in my head. So how about that? Uh, there definitely cannot hold. Not only can I not run up to the glacier to hold that color up to the glacier, we were not allowed to touch most of the glaciers. I think there was maybe one glacier that we were allowed to touch, and I don't even know for sure. I don't remember anymore if I was one of the ones, if that was the day that I went up to the glacier, or if I just said, I'm not hiking that far. I'm a little bit on the tired side. And I had broken my ankle not long before, and I was still babying it a little bit. It had healed, but I did not want to injure it. Um, so yeah, there was that too. So we have just under 10 minutes remaining, and we're getting a suggestion of some rocks along here now. At least there's suggestion of rocks. Maybe it's a suggestion of just colors going on here. I'm just going to arbitrarily think that this was a little bit more um, gray, but also horizontal, so lighter, not white. As much as one thinks the snow is white, it's not, there's really not that much that can be that bright white. White is really, um, the absolute, like a highlight, whatnot. I'm realizing I've got certainly, yes, whites on this, but that's mostly just because we don't have everything covered up. And I will have to go back and cover some of that with some detail here and there. There was some reason why I did not want to do um, the orange underpainting, and I think that it was more the notion of the glazing that I had in my head. So I'm feeling that that's a general feeling um, of what that glacier felt like. Um, uh, Maybe we'll just go back with some darks in some of these channels here and there. Jumping around a little bit, I know, but we're going to go back to now some of these rocks in the very small amount of time remaining. Um, and probably just go in with a lot of darks on verticals and then lights on uprights and trying to vary the colors of those as much as possible and as quickly as possible getting these things down. Normally, I would have 2 to 3 hours painting a scene like this on location, but it's an hour Zoom, and I don't have um, references, so it doesn't matter. And I guess I'm going to try to concentrate on um, varying where some of these um, areas are. And I'm remembering that often I can get darks to release uh, from the palette knife easier than um, lights. So I'm realizing I'm going to go back and do a little bit of that now. So I'm going to concentrate on variety, primarily horizontals, but I want there to be some angle difference. Now, you typically, when something changes angle, it needs to change color or value. It should not be the same color, should not be the same um, value. There needs to be some difference. Otherwise, it's going to not just look monotonous, but it will not feel um, that it makes sense. I feel like it's a little saison looking at this point in terms of the uh, broken color here and there. I will definitely need to go back and uh, finish, if that's the right word. So certainly not done, but a good start is what I will say. I do live painting demonstrations in the gallery as well. And so for folks that stop by the gallery, you can learn more. All of these will be compiled in some way into a video at the end. This will be posted certainly to my YouTube. It's a Greg Lecker, forget exactly what the specific number is, but you're going to see it posted on the to my website. So so that will be that. So the remaining steps that I will do certainly to fill in these all the gaps, the whites, which in a perfect world I would have had this toned as something. I'm not really sure what color. To me, my usual yellow, the more of the brownish ochre would have been something that probably makes sense rather than my typical warmer tone, which would not have made as much sense. But I feel like there's at least enough variety here that um, I'm seeing some shapes here and there. Clean colors, very important now at this stage of the process, in terms of not if one varies the colors, it can't be just mud going on in terms of the colors. They need to be some clear colors. In other words, it just can't be um, there needs to be a definite break between one plane and the next in terms of the what one is seeing. I'm not making as much sense there as maybe I would like to. Um, it's tough to talk and paint at the same time. I'm going to just a little suggestion of some different things going on in this glacier. If I like a mark, then I'm going to keep it. I'm going to try not to go back to it and play with it because that's when it's a mess. I don't remember if I think on the upright there was slight variety in like the some of the color moving like more of a grayness, but this doesn't look as um, colorful as it does on the screen. My camera, I feel like this camera saturation is turned up, and I don't know exactly how much I can play with that. Um, but I feel like there's a fair amount here that I can work with. I'll give it some time to dry. This palette is going to be covered and put into the freezer that I can work on later because I'm finishing up here and need to go on to the next session. So thank you very much for bearing with me in terms of my uh, Arctic circling back, the year-long exploration, working with different mediums to help me remember and also just experience what the overall feeling and majesty of the Arctic North, the Arctic Circle, that very special time that we spent aboard Antigua. And this would have been either it was probably a morning walk. Don't remember exactly if it was a morning or afternoon walk, but um, we would have left the ship and rode zodiacs to this, and then hiked for a while to get to this little deep area inside a fjord. So more to come.